So next up is Kristen Kraft. So she's a general manager at Animalz, a B2B content marketing agency. So not SaaS, but an agency services company. How are they doing pricing? So this is going to be a fireside chat / case study on how a pricing project was actually done and what have we learned. So Kristen, please join me here at this stage.
Hey, Pep, how's it going?
I'm kicking ass. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you. Yeah, it's been a while since I guess last time I saw you in this very office that
I know. I knew that background.
All right, so you are now at Animalz, a new place. How long have you been there?
I've been there about a year, and my segue into Animalz was particularly interesting because I've been a customer of Animalz 3 different times. My own background is in B2B SaaS marketing, so I was a customer while at Wistia, then again at Ovia Health, and then also at Tetra. So 3 different spaces, but it was cool to, I got to see Animalz capabilities in 3 different domains around video hosting, women's health tech, and then knowledge management.
There might be some people here who don't know what Animalz is, so give us a really quick overview.
Yeah, absolutely. So Animalz is a content marketing agency that focuses predominantly on B2B SaaS. We are particularly adept in building great content strategies to help growing companies achieve their growth goals, and then advising those companies on how to create excellent content that builds on top of that content strategy. As you might imagine, we tend to focus on a lot of different things, like what kind of content is going to generate a ton of organic traffic? What type of content is going to help us rank for specific keywords? Conversely, what type of content might exist in the sort of thought leadership domain that will help our founders tell their story and the story of the company and the brand better, or even down to what type of content will help us generate a ton of sales and marketing qualified leads. So we sort of run the gamut in terms of the type of content that we focus on, but it's all very, very oriented around the company's growth goals.
So I know recently you guys worked on your pricing and you did a lot of work behind the scenes. So can you please give us an overview, like why mess with the pricing? Why did you need to go in and tinker with stuff? What was the problem you were trying to solve? And then please unpack then how did you go about it?
Yeah, great question. I think that the challenge for us as an agency is probably a challenge that most agencies and actually most service businesses generally face. I would imagine it's actually like a pretty compelling problem for all companies, which is this. How do you balance flexibility and standardization? Both are deeply important. Flexibility is really important because needs change, like especially in growing companies, pivots happen all the time, whether it's a pivot in terms of your target audience and ideal customer profile. Maybe it's a pivot in your marketing strategy. Maybe it's a change in terms of your funding. Like things are changing. The only constant is change. And so, we need to have flexibility in how we price things, and specifically like how we package, because I see packaging and pricing as sort of 2 sides of the same coin. So we need to have flexibility in terms of how we are pricing and packaging things, such that if a company is extremely focused on generating organic traffic by ranking for certain keywords, and then they need to change gears like kind of abruptly to tell their story in a bigger way and focus on thought leadership content, that we are able to do that. The other factor I mentioned is standardization. It is not the best experience for customers or for us if a pivot means, 20 emails back and forth negotiating about pricing or negotiating about the types of products or services they need from us. That doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel efficient from a customer perspective. It also is not the most efficient way for us to run our business. So we need to have enough standardization. And I guess I'll layer on one additional factor here, because, although people operations might feel as though it's further afield from pricing. I actually think that they're pretty important. They have to go hand in hand. And what I mean by that is this. We have an incredible team with really varied experience. Some of our team members have worked for other agencies for years. They've managed customer relationships and client relationships in the past. Other members of our team have been writers for years and they've never interacted with customers. And so I think from a people ops perspective, that type of standardization is important as well, so that a really junior or green member of the team isn't navigating tricky conversations, and they have certain benchmarks or rules of thumb to work off of when they're talking about pricing with our customers.
And so, in a nutshell, so thank you for that context. So, was your pricing then too confusing for the customer? Were you not charging enough? Was the margin too low? What were you trying to accomplish? Like more money, simplicity? Like, what were the goals?
Is it unfair to say all of the above? Yeah, I mean, a lot of things were going on. Just to get down to brass tacks, historically, our pricing was very oriented around MRR in exchange for a certain number of articles per month. So when I joined about a year ago, we were charging most of our customers $7,500 per month for 4 articles of a specific word count and length. And I think that was problematic, because anytime a customer came to us and said, hey, that's great, but like, actually, we really need help with this benchmark report, or we really need help with these landing pages. It wasn't always like an obvious math equation to get them to the pricing that they needed, and for them to have clarity, or for us to have clarity around what that looked like. And I think that we ended up like kind of getting burned, like through our own fault, not the fault of our customers, because oftentimes we were underpricing certain things. So, for example, a benchmark report. A benchmark report doesn't have to be insanely long. Like, I know you were just talking about conducting research. A benchmark report could be pretty short. It could be made up mostly of graphics and infographics. And yet it takes a lot of effort to get that kind of quantitative feedback from people to create a reliable, accurate benchmark report, and share that kind of compelling data. And so it wasn't just because a benchmark report might be, in terms of word count, the same length as 3 blog posts. It wasn't necessarily like that math equation really wasn't working, because a lot of extra work goes into that in terms of project management, in terms of research and data analysis. So we sought to move from this model of 1 year ago of $7,500 for articles to having a lot more granularity in our pricing menu, so that when a customer came to us saying, hey, we want to do this benchmark report, we saw the work that you did on this other one, like, tell us what this looks like, we could give them not only a price for that work, but also the logic behind it. I think in general, people like to know why they're paying what they're paying. So it really behooved us to go into some detail with our own internal pricing menu about why we charged what we charged for different items. So at this point, we have a lot more granularity. But
so what are the ingredients? So typically agencies say, okay, this person costs us this many dollars an hour. We put 20% margin. So how did you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, we're still wrapping our heads around this. Like, I don't know that pricing will ever be done for Animalz. Maybe it never is for any company. It's always a work in progress. But for us, we often think about it in terms of days spent to do the work. And that is much easier for work that we've done before, much harder for new types of work. Right now, we're doing a lot of video scripting for one of our customers, and that is newer to Animalz. So, we're still getting a feel for what that looks like, but we try to think about it in terms of days.
Okay, and so you had a problem where you had standardized pricing for blog posts, but for, let's say, other type of more bespoke services, you had to figure out a methodology and how to price it. What else did you figure out? What other changes or innovations did take place?
Yeah, Pep, you asked about increasing prices. That is a big thing that we are grappling with right now. there are a few factors right now. Like, as everybody knows, hiring is really hard right now. We are looking at inflation. We're looking at fewer members in the workforce right now. Every single time I get on the phone with a customer or, a friend in the B2B SaaS space, everybody is struggling with hiring. And therefore, a lot of people have dollars that they are willing to spend on work that they're not able to do in-house. So, putting on your Econ 101 hat, like, when supply and demand are off kilter, increasing prices is your main lever. But even more important than that for us is quality. So one of our key differentiators is quality. We invest in quality. Most people, when they hear about the sort of standardized processes we have in place, are kind of floored by just how deeply we invest in quality at many different touch points. So we have a research team that will do research on every single customer, every single article that we write, to gather information and data about that topic. We also have an editing team that edits every single outline, edits every single draft. We have a copy editing team. And the reason I share the sort of breadth of processes we have in place around quality is because quality is expensive. Like, that costs money, and we think it's worth it. We think that matters, and we want to be, like, we don't mind being the most expensive content agency in the room if we're also the best content agency in the room. That's not going to be for everybody. Some companies who are trying to be scrappy and be frugal, like, we're not going to be a good fit for them. And that's okay. And we're comfortable with that because we know that might not be our ideal customer profile anyways. But for the companies that require excellent, high quality content that is data driven and research backed, we want to deliver on that promise, which costs money. So as we continue to think about how we can invest in upholding this level of quality that we aspire to, that requires more resources. And so we've been trying to get bolder about increasing our prices over time so that we can invest in hiring more editors and hiring more researchers in other parts of our process.
Was that just about, let's say, we want to increase our margins or whatever, like, we need to pay this market rate, and so hence the price needs to be this? Or did you have some sort of, like, pricing frameworks, methodologies, any type of, like, framework you use to figure out how much you should charge?
A little bit of both. So in terms of frameworks and methodologies, we love talking to customers. We love talking to other agencies. We learn a lot from our peers and are really grateful for that kind of guidance. So, we've spent, Devin, our CEO, Haley, our COO, have spent a lot of time over the past year talking with other leaders to find out how they do pricing. And we've learned a ton from them we've sort of tried to synthesize what we've heard.
So let me stop you there. So how are most people doing their prices? And my guess is like this. So.
You are completely right. It seems as though it is it's really varied from company to company. I think historically it sounds as though, there's naturally there is a cohort that is sort of pursuing a race to the bottom. Like, how can we do this as inexpensively as possible? To a certain degree, I'm like, great, we can throw that out because that's not what we're looking to do. I know that a lot of companies prefer having a retainer model, i.e., cost tied specifically to, you get this person. We don't that doesn't work as well for us because we have heard from our customers that they prefer a very predictable amount of work that they can count on publishing every single week or every single month. So we have shied away from that. But I think you're right. I think like it's pretty variable. Some of the more interesting companies though that we've talked with really opened our eyes to some new ideas around charging for credits. I think even framing our contract in terms of the number of credits per month versus the number of articles per month can change expectations. It's a little bit easier to wrap your head around allocating credits for specific things than if you have this like this fixed idea around number of articles per month.
How did you figure out then what is a credit? Like, is credit an article? Is credit a day? What's a credit? How did you figure that out?
Right now, our credits are connected to, an article, a short-ish form article, a blog post that's on the shorter side. But as I mentioned, especially vis-a-vis benchmark reports, we're finding that oftentimes customers who are willing and able to spend a larger chunk of credits at one time are proving to be even more successful. Again, because they're publishing content that's more data-driven, more nuanced, more shareable. They're getting a lot more backlinks. So, I think increasingly we want to set that expectation on day one when we kick off with a new customer, or even before that during sales conversations, and come to the table with a recommendation about how they use their credits.
I know you also worked on figuring out how to do upsells. So what have you learned?
Yeah. Upsells are such a lovely moment. I mean, yes, there is increased revenue, which is always fun. But personally, I kind of love those upsell opportunities most of all, because it's such an indicator of a strong relationship. Like the fact that somebody's like, please, like, take more money is just, it's such a great affirmation of the work that, you're doing. And again, back to my earlier point about things that like feel good or don't feel good in the customer relationship. If somebody comes saying like, hey, we want to give you more money because we need your help building these video scripts. It can really feel like throwing cold water on the conversation to then go back and forth through, 20 email exchanges trying to negotiate about the pricing. So again, when it comes to upsells in particular, I think that's where that flexibility and standardization balance like really need to, come out in full force. Ideally, that standardization is in place, like behind the scenes with Animalz, so that we can come back, we can come to our customers and say, great, you want to upsell, like tell us exactly like what your goals are, what this marketing initiative is. And we will come back to you with a price and a recommendation on how we can do that upsell.
So if I understand you correctly, so mainly you're focused on productizing all the services and standardizing the pricing, but still every now and then bespoke custom requests come in that is not in your price list, and then you need to go back and figure it out internally before being able to quote the customer.
Yeah, I really like that phrase you just used around productizing things. Our CEO, Haley, often says that everything is product. And I think that that's true. And even to a certain degree, like our pricing menu itself is somewhat akin to a product. Engaging in conversation with us about pricing should be an excellent experience for our customers. And we need to think about that experience in a really focused, intentional way, just as intentional as we might be when thinking about a new product or feature launch if we were a SaaS business.
One thing that can slow businesses down is that if, let's say there's a customer odd request coming in, it's not clear how much one should charge. So how is this? What kind of freedom do people have? So I know you guys have 100 plus people. Does it every time some executive needs to sign off, this is the quote, or is there a degree of freedom, or like how is that organized behind the scenes? Who has the liberty to quote the price?
Yeah, one of our company values is ownership. And I want to take a moment just to like give some praise to our people ops team. So I think that Animalz lives by our company values more closely than any company I've ever been a part of, advised, been on the board of. It's amazing how clearly we live our values every day. And I think this comes into play around pricing and that sort of customer experience around upsells or around more bespoke work in particular. And what I mean by that is every content marketer on our team owns their own customer relationships. That doesn't mean that on day one, somebody who is just kind of getting started in their career is like thrown on to customer calls by themselves. But once people have their sea legs, we really encourage and support every member of our team in owning their customer relationships. So they are often attending customer calls by themselves. They are reporting back to their customer at the end of every month to show the impact of the work that they have done. And what this also means is that those content marketers are navigating pricing conversations, upsell conversations with their customers directly. Occasionally, especially when a customer is interested in doing something more bespoke, they will come to others for guidance and ideas about how to structure it. But we do ask people to own solution finding as much as they're owning like the initial question. So coming to Slack most often, because we're an all remote company, and saying, hey, this customer would like to upsell with us. They want us to do, we'll just stick with the video scripts example. Like they want to do some video scripts. I think that maybe we should structure it in this way, and here's why. Does anybody have any input? And I love this approach and how we use it in Slack for two reasons. One, it's very transparent. I think the more that we can have these kind of conversations transparently, the more other people can learn through observation. And then building on that second, I think it also makes us more efficient as a company in the future, like being able to go back and see how other people navigated it and why, see that thought process helps everybody on the team level up and be more efficient the next time around.
Now that you've done, for the for the time being with your pricing project, any counterintuitive learnings, things you didn't expect, any gotchas that you'd like to share?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it is always striking to me how people don't have people don't have lower expectations for lower price things. Like I think that having a high priced product is an important signal about the value they can expect to get. I think when we have encountered moments where, we've wanted / needed to raise pricing so that we can invest in quality in an even deeper way. We question that decision. We question whether incoming customers will balk at that higher price and then we'll lose them forever. We question whether it's possible to go back to existing customers who are on grandfathered pricing and negotiate with them on this higher pricing tier. It can feel scary. But at the same time, I also think it's important to be able to, or rather that conversation is easier if you can explain the why. I think going to our customers and saying, hey, this is our pricing. In fact, we're actually raising these prices and here's why. Like we need to invest more deeply in editing. And we're also growing our research team. And we also know that we need data analysis as a skill set on our team to navigate benchmark reports and other data-driven content. I think that kind of higher price point oftentimes reinforces the differentiators like quality that we're trying to convey.
If you had to now build and present and share a playbook for other agencies and professional service companies that for some reason want to start tackling their pricing, so what you just say is like step one, and then what are all the remaining steps, and is there a particular order?
Yeah. Maybe this is just my own like B2B SaaS background talking, since this is always the name of the game in SaaS. But number one, talk to customers. I will jump at any opportunity to talk to any customer and hear how they are thinking about pricing. I think doing it in an iterative way is really important as well. So, talking with a customer, coming to a hypothesis about the right direction, and then talking to two other customers and sharing that hypothesis.
What do you ask the customers? Like, what does that conversation look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what aspects of your pricing that you're looking to change. So, for example, we've gone back. I'll just give a really specific example from our business. We've gone back and forth on pricing for more esoteric topics and content. For example, we have one team that focuses exclusively on technical content, usually content written for developers as the audience. Oftentimes that type of content requires an extra layer of skill or expertise. Like if that content requires code snippets, it has to be written by a developer, or there needs to be a collaboration like with a developer who can create those code snippets. So, a question mark in our mind was, how do we account for that? Like, if we need to be paying developer salaries to hire developer writers, is there a willingness to pay on the part of our customer? Are those code snippets a nice to have, or are they a need to have? Can we get there by interviewing subject matter experts within our customer's organization, and then have just a really excellent writer turning that into a blog post? Or do we truly need a writer who's also a developer? I think like going to customers with a hypothesis of like, no, like we think we need, based on past conversations, we think we need a developer writer. Now let's go ask, 5 other customers who are in that technical content space if they agree, and very specifically inviting them to poke holes. Like, what's wrong with this? Like, what questions would you have? Like, what qualms would you have? Why, if you got pushback from your boss about spending more money with Animalz for a developer writer, why might your boss push back?
Cool. Okay. What's the next step there after talking to customers?
Yeah. I think from there, coming up with a working hypothesis to surface with the team. Everybody in your organization has visibility into different parts of the process. Everybody might have some important information to share, important holes to poke in that logic. So I think coming to the team with that hypothesis that has been fine-tuned through conversations with customers and asking for input early and often. And I say early and often very intentionally. I think that especially when it comes to a service business like ours, it's really important that every member of the team feels confident about what you're doing and why, whether it's pricing things or the services that you're offering. It's really important that there is team buy-in. I tend to think that people are much more likely to feel that sense of buy-in if they've been able to participate in the process and they've been not only allowed to share their input and their feedback, but specifically asked for that input and feedback, given permission to poke holes, because it's far better that the team can poke holes and share any reservations they might have early on in the process versus waiting until the new packaging and pricing is out the door, and then you find that the team doesn't really buy into this new idea.
Awesome. Let's also grab a couple of user questions, attendee questions here. So Sona is asking, you said high price signals high value. What if you have a freemium, or a free tier? Does that mean the product is not good?
I'm such a big believer in product-led growth. Yeah, I think having a free tier is incredibly important. Having an enterprise version that is high priced, hopefully signals high value. But I think on the other end of the spectrum, again, back to everything is product. You want that product experience. You want to think about that experience engaging with your free product very intentionally, just as intentionally as you think about the way that somebody engages with your paid product.
And last, when is the right time for a company to invest effort into their pricing strategy? And if you're a startup just launching, how do you pick the number? Should I charge $25 a month, or how do you figure that out?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, I sort of think that investing time and effort in a pricing strategy is something that should happen very early on in a company's evolution, and then should happen again repeatedly, even if it's just a matter of gut checking and rethinking, is this still the right strategy for us? I think especially in the SaaS world where it's so easy to change your pricing, at least for new customers, it's so easy to change, any sort of pricing you have published online. It's even like fairly easy to change, again, for new customers, the features that are associated with different pricing tiers. I think it's important to do that a lot. And when I was at Wistia for 4 years, I couldn't even count on two hands like the number of times that we played around with our pricing. And I think it was really important. Every single time we played around with our pricing, we learned something new about how that landed with our customers. And it opened our eyes to opportunities we hadn't realized before. So, Shubrank, to answer your question, like I think doing it like very early on, at least having one person dedicating some of their brain space and mental energy to thinking about pricing, and being willing to come back to that on a regular basis is important. But picking the right number to get started with, like, I think that's maybe a going to customers question, asking prospects about pricing. And then, of course, like looking at competitor data around their pricing as well always helps.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Absolutely. Thank you.